Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories number 43 for mid-April 2025. Timothee Adamowski, idol of the Boston Pops.
That are covered with corn. Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace?
Welcome to the 43rd episode of Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories, an historic and active cemetery in Bala, Pennsylvania. I am Dr. Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine from Temple University, volunteer tour guide, and volunteer podcaster. I'm recording this in mid-April of 2025. Laurel Hill West opened in 1869 across the river from its sister cemetery, Laurel Hill East, in Philadelphia. It's more than twice as big as Laurel Hill East. It has a totally different feel and a strikingly different population. Laurel Hill East is a Victorian-feeling cemetery that's associated with the Civil War. Laurel Hill West has more of an Edwardian feel and a greater association with the Great War. But the two cemeteries are both open 365 days a year, now from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's plenty of parking at the business office just off Belmont Avenue or at the conservatory in the bell tower. If you enter from Belmont, follow the road past the second gate. It has the white line in the middle. Or you can just come in while you're walking the Kinwood Trail or come up from the Pencoast pedestrian bridge in Philadelphia. Today's podcast is about Polish-born violinist Timothee Adamowski, good friend of Ignaz Paderewski, who served as one of the first conductors of the Boston Pops Orchestra. For a few years, his name was intertwined with that of famed Australian soprano Nellie Melba, but he ended up marrying Gertrude Pancoast of a famed medical family in Philadelphia. Timothy is interred in the Pancoast family plot at Laurel Hill West. Timothee Adamowski, 1857-1943, idol of the Boston Pops. When Polish composer and pianist Frédéric Chopin died in Paris in 1849, his body was buried at Père Lachaise Cemetery. But according to his request, his heart was surgically removed and preserved in a vase of alcohol, likely cognac. It was carried to Poland by his sister, Ludwika. She gave it to the Holy Cross Church in Warsaw, where it was placed in a church pillar. Nazis stole the heart during the Warsaw Uprising, but it was returned in 1945. Polish composer and pianist Ignaz Jan Paderewski died in New York City in 1941. Poland was occupied by Germany at the time, so his body was first placed at Arlington National Cemetery until after the end of communist rule. Then it was moved to St. John's Archcathedral in Warsaw in 1992. But Paderewski's heart is kept in a bronze sculpture at the National Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa near Doylestown, Pennsylvania, about a half-hour drive from Philadelphia. Paderewski was incredibly popular whenever he came stateside to tour and perform. He always planned his tours so that he could spend Christmas or Easter with either the Stojowskis in New York or with the Adamowskis in Cambridge and Boston. When Paderewski published his autobiography in 1938, he effusively praised his good friends, the Adamowski brothers. The two Adamowski boys, Tim and Joe, were my companions from the very beginning of my student life, my first intimate friends outside the Kurtoff family that I held in the greatest affection. After the first New York season, I went to Boston, where I already had friends in the Boston Symphony, in Timothy and Joseph Adamowski. Timothy was the first violin, and Joseph the cellist. Timothy Adamowski was born March 24, 1857, in Warsaw. His father, Vincent, was an artist and a music enthusiast who worked as an engineer. At the age of 7, Timothy began to study violin with an instructor. He attended the Warsaw Conservatory, where he was mentored by Emanuel Konski, who is reported to have studied with Paganini in Paris in 1837, and to have acquired Paganini's violins and manuscripts. From 1876 to 1879, Timothy continued his studies at the Paris Conservatory. He later performed with the Cologne Orchestra in Paris, the Philharmonic Orchestra in London, and Opera Orchestra in Warsaw. Adamowski came to America in 1878. That was 13 years before Paderewski's first visit, and he settled in Boston. The Polish community in Boston was practically non-existent. What little did exist centered around Dr. Marja Zarzuski, a woman born in Berlin, but had studied medicine in Cleveland shortly after Elizabeth Blackwell led the way for women in medicine. Although their numbers were small, Poles had been around since long before the founding of the nation. And by the time the Mayflower landed in 1620 at Plymouth, Massachusetts, a group of Polish artisans had been hard at work in Jamestown, Virginia for more than 12 years. Poland had been a Catholic country for many centuries, so attempts to establish Quakerism in the fatherland never really caught on. One of the first known Poles in Philadelphia was Anthony Sandowski. He served as an Indian trader and interpreter. He became a naturalized citizen in 1734, and he later migrated westward, where his family were pioneers in the founding of Sandusky, Ohio, named after the Sandowski family. In 1776, 30-year-old Polish-Lithuanian Tadeusz Kosciuszko had moved to North America, and he took part in the American Revolutionary War as a colonel in the Continental Army. An accomplished military architect, he designed and oversaw the construction of state-of-the-art fortifications, including those at West Point, New York. In 1783, in recognition of his services, the Continental Congress promoted him to brigadier general. When Kosciuszko died in 1817, his body was fragmented. His embalmed carcass is in a crypt at Wawel Cathedral in Krakow. Most of his internal organs are interred in a graveyard near Solothurn, but his heart, which was initially kept in an urn at the Polish Museum in Switzerland, was repatriated to Poland in 1927. It now reposes in a chapel at the Royal Castle. Kosciuszko's home at 3rd and Pine in Philadelphia is the smallest unit of the United States National Park Service, 0.02 acres. That's a mere 871 square feet. The other Polish hero of the American Revolution was Casimir Pulaski, the father of American cavalry. Pulaski, who's thought to have been intersex or possibly even a woman, was killed by grape shot in 1779 at the Siege of Savannah, where he is thought to be buried. Between 1820 and 1851, Polish entrants to the United States never exceeded 100 in any given year. Until 1879, the annual influx was constantly less than 1,800 people, except for 1873. It reached 3,338 that year. So the annual average of Polish overseas emigration for the 1880s was more than 3 times the yearly rate for the 1870s, 6,000 versus 1,800. For the 1890s, it was 15 times higher. For the 1900s, 24 times higher. And for the remaining years before the war, 26 times higher. The largest Polish inhabited city in the United States was Chicago. It increased its Polish component almost 20 times between 1873 and 1918 to almost 400,000. I have often heard it claimed that Chicago has or had the highest Polish-speaking population outside of Warsaw. This is highly unlikely to have ever been the case. I mean, the populations of Krakow and Wrocław and Lodz all have historically outpaced the Polish ancestry population in Chicago. So I think that is an old wives' tale. During Timothee Adamowski's first few years in North America, he toured as a violin soloist with famed operatic soprano Clara Louise Kellogg, coloratura soprano Emma Thursby, and their manager Max Strakash. In case you wondered, as I did, an operatic soprano specializes in dramatic singing style that focuses on power, resonance, emotional expression. A coloratura soprano uses advanced technique to execute rapid, complex vocal passages. There's a focus on agility, flexibility, and clarity. This allows for the performance of intricate melodic lines. Let's put it in jazz terms. Sarah Vaughan was operatic. Ella Fitzgerald was coloratura. I also mentioned Max Strakash in 2 earlier podcasts. All Bones Considered number 12, A Night at the Opera, and Biographical Bytes from Bala number 4, Theodore Presser, the Music Man. On September 2nd, 1882, there was an article in the Minneapolis Tribune about an operetta in the works called Lord Buncombe's Daughter. It was being co-written by author and poet Julia Ward Howe, the composer of the lyrics of the Battle Hymn of the Republic in 1861. Music was being written by Mr. Timothee Adamowski. However, as of 1887, it had never been presented, and I find no record of it ever being presented anywhere. So from 1884 to 1908, Timothee Adamowski was a member of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He appeared as a soloist with them 82 times. The BSO had been founded 3 years before his arrival in 1881 by Boston businessman Henry Lee Higginson. He paid the musicians about $1,500 a year. This was the second symphonic orchestra named for a city, after the New York Philharmonic, which had been founded back in 1842. Remember that the Philadelphia Orchestra wasn't founded until 1900. I also covered that in 2 prior podcasts. All Bones Considered number 36 on the 3 remarkable Wister sisters, and Biographical Bytes from Bala number 28 on the Philadelphia Orchestra. Much of the music being performed by large symphonic groups in the late 19th century tended to be rather ponderous and turgid, especially in the years that the BSO was under the baton of Wilhelm Gericke. In one 1887 concert, Brahms' Third and Bruckner's Seventh Symphonies drove the audience out of Symphony Hall by the hundreds until at the final bow there were more people on stage than in the audience. The next year, conductor Gericke showed it was no fluke when he repeated his house emptying, this time with a performance of Richard Strauss' symphonic poem Aus Italien. It became a joke among newspaper reporters. One suggested that in case of a fire, Bruckner's Seventh was far better than a squirt of water to extinguish it. And when the new Symphony Hall opened in 1900, someone actually managed to put a sign up that pointed to a fire escape and read, "This way out in case of Brahms." People had started to recognize early in the 19th century that not everyone enjoyed dense, ponderous orchestral pieces. By May 1827, composer and conductor Johann Strauss Sr. provided dance music at Viennese coffee houses and theaters with his orchestra. French conductor Philippe Mouzard initiated a concert series in Paris called Promenade Concerts. They mainly featured arrangements of operatic arias and overtures, along with dance music such as the quadrille and the schottische. During intermissions, attendees could walk around the concert hall. This led to the naming of the series as the Promenades. This tradition of light music concerts continues now in the annual BBC Proms concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall. Dance halls and beer gardens existed in major East Coast cities, including Philadelphia, from the late 18th century. Several were named after London's Vauxhall Gardens. Philadelphia's Vauxhall occupied the block surrounded by Broad, Juniper, Walnut, and George, which is now Sansom Streets. In 1819, a riot had erupted at the Vauxhall Gardens when a balloon ascension failed, and guards beat a boy unconscious for trying to sneak in to avoid the exorbitant $1 admission fee. The angry crowd beat up the guards, then destroyed the fences and destroyed the balloon. This location, the Vauxhall Gardens, later became the site of the Dundas Lippincott Yellow Mansion. Dundas and Lippincott are buried in Laurel Hill South in a mausoleum that has an Ouroboros on the door. This location of the Yellow Mansion is now the location of the Wells Fargo building. Timothy established the Adamowski Quartet in Boston in 1888. It featured him as first violinist, Emanuel Fiedler as the second violinist. Emanuel Fiedler was the father of the future Boston Pops conductor Arthur Fiedler. Daniel Kuntz on viola and Giuseppe Campaneri on cello. This quartet performed about 30 concerts annually in major cities across the United States. In 1890, it was reconstructed by A. Moldauer, Max Zach, and Joseph Adamowski. And by 1896, the quartet had evolved into the Adamowski Trio, Timothy on violin, brother Joseph on cello, and Joseph's wife, Antoinette Sumovska-Adamowska, on piano. The trio garnered significant acclaim when they toured the country and overseas. While they were in Poland, they played before the Tsar, Tsarina, and Russian court, and were presented with a diamond ring, considered at the time one of the highest honors in Russia. Timothy joined the faculty of the New England Conservatory of Music in 1907, and he served for many years as professor of graduate violin. During Timothy's time in Boston, he frequented elite spots like the Tavern Club, the St. Botolph Club, and Isabella Stewart Gardner's Salon at 142 Beacon Street. Mrs. Gardner had started an art collection in 1891. She loved to host gatherings that were filled with music and conversation. It is highly likely that Vermeer's The Concert would have been in the room with the musicians when Timothy performed there. John Singer Sargent was a frequent visitor also. He knew both Paderewski and the Adamowskis. He once painted Joseph Adamowski. It was around 1890 that the BSO decided to present their own lighter concerts with less serious music. These promenade concerts consisted of 3 segments. There were an average of 4 pieces in each part. The first part featured short, rousing works, gallops, polkas, quadrilles, and often started with a march. After an intermission, the second part usually had more serious music, movements from symphonies or concertos or ballet music. And then there was a second intermission, which gave audiences more time to socialize and purchase food and drink. And the third part returned to a lighter format, selections from popular operettas or other popular music of the day. And the last piece of each concert was always a gallop or a march. Although most works were by 19th century European composers, not all the pieces fell into the traditional category of light, nor was the repertoire entirely European. Many American composers, including some women, were featured. Promenade concerts included contemporary works by art music composers. Composers known for their light music frequently appeared in the programs. Franz von Suppe, Franz Lehar, Jacques Offenbach. Waltzes and polkas by the two Strausses were probably the most common works in early promenade concert programs. On the first program of July 11, 1885, there were the Pizzicato Polka by Strauss Jr., the Donaulieder Waltz by Strauss Sr., in a later concert, Strauss Jr.'s Wiener Blut Waltz, the overture to his comic opera Prince Methusalem, and a polka called Unter Donner und Blitz were performed. Boston's promenade concerts were inspired not by New York or Paris or London, but by Berlin. In 1867, Benjamin Bilse started popular concerts in Berlin's Bilse Concert House for the emerging middle class and working class. Attendees could eat and drink while they enjoyed orchestral music. Bilse aimed to educate through fine music. The Boston Symphony had a strong German influence with many German-born musicians. Conductor Wilhelm Gericke brought over 20 more musicians from Germany, which made them familiar with the Austro-German repertoire that was central to Bilse's concerts. So many of the people who performed in these promenade or these pop concerts were members of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. From 1890 to 1894, Timothee Adamowski conducted the Boston Symphony Orchestra summer concerts, which were now called the Musical Hall Popular Concerts, or simply the Boston Pops. He was known as the idol of the Pops. Women always formed a significant portion of his audience. The environment at the promenade concerts seems to have been designed specifically to appeal to women. Colorful decorations, light refreshments, and even electric fans to blow away tobacco smoke. The Pops concerts only cost 25 cents. That's compared to $1 for the BSO. Plus, a scheduled program of 12 numbers could easily extend to 20 with the encores. That would be unheard of with the symphony orchestra. The motto of the Pops became every evening at 8, except Sundays, so that during the summer season, up to 144 concerts were given each year. For example, Wednesday evening, June 24, 1891, this is in the 6th season of the popular concerts, with Adamowski conducting the Prophet March by Meyerbeer, Overture to Rienzi by Wagner, New Wien Valse by Strauss, and selections from Carmen by Bizet. That was the first section. The second section, the more serious section, featured works by Gounod, Delibes, Massenet, and then Mozart's Turkish March, so getting back to a march at the end of the second section. The final section featured the spinning song from Wagner's Flying Dutchman, Gounod's Ave Maria, and finished with a schottische by E. Marie, about whom I can find nothing. In this first turn as a conductor from 1891 to 1894, Timothy apparently couldn't initially relax into the lightness of the programs. Two newspaper reporters scolded him. One said, Come, Mr. Adamowski, don't take these promenade concerts so seriously. Don't frown and scowl and rap your stand when people talk. They do not go to music hall for education. Besides, your facial indignation is not personally becoming. A second reporter said, What an autocratic conductor Taddy is. He raps like a martinet on the music stand when he wants silence in the hall. And it really shows what well-behaved people we are, for not an eyelash winks nor a lip moves until his baton gives us the signal to breathe again. Despite his stern manner, Timothy remained a heartthrob. He was only of medium height, but he had graceful aristocratic manners, charming, companionable nature. His presence was essential at Boston's social events. Later in life, Mrs. Joseph Adamowska recalled how her brother-in-law enjoyed dancing at exclusive soirees, often early until morning, despite his age. In 1900, Timothy was offered the opportunity to return to his fatherland to become conductor of an orchestra to be formed in Warsaw. It would pattern itself after the Boston Symphony, with 12 strictly symphonic concerts in the winter season at Warsaw and popular concerts on Saturday and Sunday evenings throughout the season. The promotion for these concerts emphasized that beer, wine, and other refreshments would be provided and smoking would be allowed. That plan apparently fell through. He was back in the States in less than a year, and by 1903 he was again on the podium in front of the Boston Pops. In August 1903, a syndicated newspaper story copyrighted by W.R. Hearst gave a dateline of Boston and the headline, "Did He Jilt Melba?" Timothee Adamowski, violin virtuoso, the Adonis of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, beau deal and idol of the music-loving young women of Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Washington, is to marry. Already hundreds of his gentle admirers are asking, "Who is she, Melba?" Adamowski's devotion to the fair Australian songbird dates back many moons, but it is not Melba. That is the tragedy of it. This was a huge deal. Born Helen Porter Mitchell in Australia in 1861, Nellie Melba took her professional name from her hometown of Melbourne. She was an operatic lyric coloratura soprano who had become one of the most famous singers of the late Victorian era and the early 20th century. She and Enrico Caruso were by far the best-selling artists for Camden RCA Victor. She was even included in the lyrics of a Cole Porter song, "Be Like the Bluebird," if you've ever seen the musical Anything Goes. Moonface Martin sings this song. It starts an old Australian bush song Melba used to sing. Nellie Melba is so beloved in Australia that right now her face graces the front of the Australian $100 bill. Now, Timothee Adamowski and Nellie Melba toured together a few years before this, and Timothy's feelings towards Nellie were blatantly obvious to anyone who saw them perform together. Nellie soon noticed, and she even encouraged the attention. She had married in Australia as a teenager, but that husband relocated to Texas without her, and he became a successful sheep rancher. Nellie filed for divorce. And when she was back in the United States in 1901, Timothy followed her around from city to city as she toured, and when the season ended, they went to London together on vacation. The entire music world knew that Timothee Adamowski and Nellie Melba would be the next international power couple in music. Thus, it was a total shock in the Brahmin Society of Boston when they learned that Timothee Adamowski's betrothed was Philadelphia Society matron Gertrude L. Pancoast, 1869-1951, daughter of famed surgeon and anatomist William Pancoast, granddaughter of a founder of Thomas Jefferson University, Joseph Pancoast. I talked about William in All Bones Considered, number 46, Fathers of American Medicine, number 3, Some Ethical Dilemmas. He's the surgeon who in 1884 had used a surgical resident's sperm to surreptitiously impregnate the wife of a Quaker merchant without the couple's knowledge. I talk about her grandfather Joseph when I give special medical tours at Laurel Hill East. In a special dispatch to the Baltimore Sun, dated September 2nd, 1903. Dateline, Narragansett Pier, Rhode Island. Miss Gertrude Lewis Pancoast, daughter of Dr. William H. Pancoast of Philadelphia, was married to Mr. Timothee Adamowski, a well-known violinist of Boston, in the Church of St. Peter by the Sea. The bride, a tall, stately brunette, was handsomely gowned in a crêpe de chine trimmed with Irish lace with white ostrich feathers. Miss Pancoast is well known in society. Among telegrams of congratulations received by the bride and groom were those from Mr. and Mrs. Ignaz Paderewski. Gertrude's brother gave her away at the altar. Her father, Dr. William, had died a couple of years earlier. Thus, this passionate affair between two international stars simply evaporated. I cannot determine why Timothy and Nellie broke up. I found 4 biographies of Nellie Melba on archive.org. 3 of them do not even mention Timothee Adamowski. The 4th mentions him in passing, but it never delves into the relationship beyond saying that it existed. So there was this huge romance between these 2 megastars that just simply disappeared, and he married somebody else. He married a Philadelphia girl. In 1907, Timothee Adamowski announced his retirement after 22 years of continual connection with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, although he would continue to play with the Adamowski Quartet and the Adamowski String Trio. They went back on the road. You can find announcements of their concerts in various newspapers. Timothy and Gertrude were highly active members of Boston society. They could be found at any number of fundraisers over the next 30-some years. He stayed a strong supporter of Boston's small but growing Polish community. He was always roused by the sight of the Polish flag or colorful Polish costumes. The Adamowski's names appeared for the last time on a conservatory program in November 1940 at a memorial concert for Paderewski's 80th birthday. Gertrude made the introductions for the evening. Ignaz Paderewski's death at age 80 in 1941 affected Timothy greatly. During the funeral services at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, he sat very close to Paderewski's coffin. Although he was an old man, he walked without benefit of a cane and seemed insulted if someone offered an arm to assist. Timothy died at 86 in 1843. Unfortunately, he was pretty much forgotten. There was only a brief notice in the Boston Globe. Despite his tenuous connection to Philadelphia, he's buried in his wife's family plot in the Norriton section of Laurel Hill West. When Gertrude died in 1951, she got several paragraphs in the newspaper, mostly about the years that she dedicated to physically disabled children. She is buried next to Timothy at Laurel Hill West. In the May 2025 episode of All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 74, I'm going to talk about several men who were killed in the killing fields of France soon after the United States entered the Great War in 1918. There are more than I expected. Most are interred in France and have a cenotaph at Laurel Hill East or Laurel Hill West. There are at least 5 people that I want to talk about. For mid-May 2025, Biographical Bytes from Bala, I hope to find enough material on John W. Merriam, a Philadelphia entrepreneur and entertainment impresario for whom the theater on South Broad Street was named before it was the Miller Theater and after it was the Schubert Theater. For activities and tours at the cemetery, go to the website laurelhillphl.com/events. The book, All Bones Considered, 52 Laurel Hill Women, will be coming out later this year. I do have several author events already arranged at local libraries. I hope to have a booth at the Market of the Macabre where I will sell it at a slight discount if you want to come and get an autographed copy of the book from me. I'll have more details as time goes along. As is true with any large project, you've heard this before, that the first 90% of the project takes the first 90% of time, and then the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the time. That's where I am now. I'm in the last 10% of the project, and it's taking another 90% of the time. But I'll get there. I promise it will be out by the end of the year. All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories, and Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories are mostly research, written, narrated, and produced by me, Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine from Temple University, volunteer tour guide and podcaster for both cemeteries, and author of the book, All Bones Considered, 52 Laurel Hill Women. You can reach me through my email, jrlexjr1947@gmail.com. The theme song, Names at Peace, is by local artist James Harrow. Maybe, just maybe, I will see you on a tour. I have a couple coming up in May, so look for those. Stay safe, stay well, stay above ground. Bibliography is coming up next. Surprising number of articles that I used for this. Mostly newspaper articles. The big one that was copyright 1903 by William Randolph Hearst. I got mine out of the Minneapolis Daily Times from Sunday, September 6th, 1903. But it was in several other Sunday articles also. It was an early example of a syndicated article. From the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, an article about Vauxhall Garden by Joseph Jackson. This is from volume 57, number 4, from 1933, pages 289 to 298. A lot of good material out of an article called The Adamowskis, Musicians and Patriots by Bronislaw A. Jezierski. It's out of Polish American Studies, Volume 5, Numbers 1 and 2, January through June 1948, pages 14 to 32. The Polish Immigrant in Philadelphia to 1914 by M. Theodoseta Lewandowska. That's from the Records of the American Catholic Historical Society of Philadelphia, Volume 65, Number 2, June 1954, pages 67 through 101. East European Immigration to the United States by Bernard D. Weinrib, The Jewish Quarterly Review, April 1955, Volume 45, Number 4, Tercentenary issue, pages 497 to 528. Polish Immigration to the United States before World War II, an overview by Dominik Pacyga, Pacyga. That's also from Polish American Studies, Spring 1982, Volume 39, Number 1, pages 28 to 37. Pre-World War I Polish Emigration to the United States, Motives and Statistics, Victor R. Green. The Polish Review, Summer 1961, Volume 6, Number 3, pages 45 to 68. Every Evening at 8, The Rise of the Promenade Concerts in Late 19th Century Boston by Kenneth H. Marcus. American Music, Volume 36, Number 2, Summer 2018, pages 194 to 221. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Come back next month. I've got more for you. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, stay above ground.